What if I told you there is a beverage that has been shown to reduce your risk of all-cause mortality by 32%? That means at any given point in time, if you consume this beverage regularly, you are 32% less likely to die. You'd probably think I'm joking, but I'm not. Not only this, but what if I told you it reduces your risk of heart disease, cancer, neurodegenerative disorder, and diabetes? Furthermore, it's not extremely expensive, costs about $5 a day to get the required amount depending on your source. Alright, I'll stop clickbaiting and tell you what it is. So the drink is, drumroll please, coffee. Now before you start raging in the comment section saying I'm not a real doctor, let's be completely clear. I'm not saying chugging down 3 cups of Starbucks with an exorbitant amount of whipped cream and sugar is particularly good for your health. At that point, coffee ceases to be a superfood and more so a recipe for diabetes. However, in this video we will be going through some juicy research surrounding coffee beans, and I'm gonna be honest, some of the data really surprised me. If you're new here, my name is Sunny. I'm a junior doctor from Australia, passionate about health, fitness, and longevity. I've been researching anti-aging topics for the last 8 years of my life, and this has been facilitated by me completing a Bachelor of Medical Science. With that out of the way, let's delve into the research. As a brief introduction, in this video we're going to go through many of the common diseases which are responsible for all-cause mortality, including cardiovascular disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, and cancer, and I'll show you the implications that coffee can have on all of them. Let's start with cardiovascular disease and stroke, primarily because it's the biggest killer with the most impact. Historically, up to 80% of health practitioners would recommend against coffee in patients with cardiovascular disease. However, this misconception has been challenged by recent observational studies reporting not only the safety but also a beneficial effect on arrhythmia and CVD prevention. The first example of this is a large prospective cohort study with 449,652 participants from the UK Biobank that were followed over a period of approximately 12 years. All coffee subtypes were associated with a reduction in incident cardiovascular disease versus non-drinkers, as was all-cause mortality. The graph shown demonstrates this effect, and as you can see, there is a U-shaped relationship where the hazard ratio or risk of dying at any point is lowest when the bar is a teal color for cardiovascular disease, congestive heart failure, coronary heart disease, and stroke. This teal color corresponds to approximately 2 to 3 standard drinks of coffee a day. As to the underlying reason by which coffee appears to protect against cardiovascular disease, it's likely a combination of factors. Caffeine is known to increase endothelial nitric oxide release, downregulate lipogenesis, reduce insulin sensitivity, and has antioxidant properties which may play a part in reducing coronary vascular disease. Furthermore, coffee contains polyphenols, including chlorogenic acid, the antioxidant ferulic acid, and microelements such as magnesium. Next up on this list is cancer, and specifically in this case, a study was done on colorectal cancer. This study demonstrated that coffee consumption is associated with a reduced risk of colorectal cancer, as well as all-cause mortality. It actually demonstrated that consuming more than 4 cups a day of coffee compared to an intake of less than 2 cups was associated with a 32% lower risk of colorectal cancer recurrence. You can actually also appreciate this in the graph shown. As coffee consumption increases, the hazard ratio or risk of dying at any point in time appears to be decreasing. Plausible underlying mechanisms by which coffee consumption may influence colorectal carcinogenesis would involve various chemoprotective properties of the heterogeneous components of coffee. These chemoprotective properties include anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, anti-proliferative, pro-apoptotic, and insulin sensitizing properties. Additionally, coffee consumption has proposed to be protective against the hallmarks of cancer by activating pathways such as NRF2, which reduces oxidative stress. Interestingly, astaxanthin works by a similar mechanism to function as a powerful antioxidant, and you can see a link for that video in the description below. Coffee consumption could also modulate microbiota composition, which may in turn promote the chemopreventative or therapeutic actions against colorectal cancer. Next down the list, we have Alzheimer's disease or dementia. A quantitative review was performed of 4 observational studies that evaluated the association between Alzheimer's disease and coffee consumption. There was an obvious protective effect of coffee consumption in the pooled estimate. However, one limitation is that the homogeneity test was highly significant, indicating heterogeneity across the pooled studies. Another huge limitation in this study is that 3 of the incorporated studies used interview questionnaires. It goes without saying that patients with Alzheimer's disease are less likely to remember consuming coffee for obvious reasons. Another issue would be the cause-effect bias. Patients with Alzheimer's disease suffer progressive degeneration of a part of the brain known as the striatum, causing low dopamine and serotonin levels. It's been suggested that subjects showing novelty-seeking behavior and addiction have higher dopamine and serotonin levels. It comes as no surprise then that addictive agents such as coffee, smoking, and alcohol appear to have a protective effect, which could be explained by the higher endogenous dopamine and serotonin levels in subjects showing novelty-seeking behavior and addiction. I'm not saying that the results aren't partially true, just that in the context of Alzheimer's, they should be taken with a grain of salt. However, there is another neurodegenerative disease we can look at which showed similar effects. Specifically, a dose-response meta-analysis was carried out between Parkinson's disease risk and coffee, tea, and caffeine consumption. There was a total of 13 articles involving 901,764 participants for coffee. A non-linear relationship was found between coffee consumption and Parkinson's disease risk overall, and the strength of protection reached the maximum at approximately 3 cups a day. This has been clearly shown on the graph on the screen. Regarding the underlying cause, coffee consists of a complex chemical mixture containing many compounds, amongst which caffeine warrants the most attention. Caffeine, as an adenosine antagonist, could attenuate the neurochemical and anatomical dopaminergic lesions, improve the motor deficits of Parkinson's disease, and reduce off-time and dyskinesia. In contrast to the motor stimulant properties of caffeine, which show tolerance on repeated exposure, the neuroprotective effect of caffeine showed no tolerance to chronic caffeine administration in mice. Besides caffeine, the cytoprotective transcription factor NRF2 and cafestol in coffee were also found to be able to confer neuroprotection in fly models of Parkinson's disease. One big limitation is that smoking is associated with significantly decreased Parkinson's disease risk, and coffee consumers are much more likely to smoke. Although there were attempts in the study to adjust for this, the possibility of residual confounding warrants explanation. The last one we will focus on is type 2 diabetes. We will be looking at a systematic review and meta-analysis for this one, which used data from 18 studies with information on 457,922 participants. There was an inverse log linear relationship between coffee consumption and subsequent risk of diabetes, such that every additional cup of coffee consumed in a day was associated with a 7% reduction in the excess risk of diabetes risk, even after adjustment for potential confounders. This is clearly shown in the graph where increasing coffee consumption shows a reducing risk for type 2 diabetes. Given the fact that these protective effects of tea and coffee are independent of several potentially confounding variables, raises the possibility of direct biological effects. These findings suggest that the protective effects on coffee and tea are unlikely to solely be the effect of caffeine, but rather a broader range of chemical constituents within these beverages, such as magnesium, lignans, and chlorogenic acids. These components have been demonstrated to have a beneficial effect on biological pathways intimately involved in glucose homeostasis and insulin secretion. So, this reduction in the 4 main killers, cardiovascular disease, cancer, neurodegenerative disease, and diabetes, likely explains why coffee has such a beneficial effect on our health span. Another compound shown to significantly extend lifespan is astaxanthin, which is an antioxidant found in algae, and it is approximately 6,000 times stronger than vitamin C. You can check out a video that I made on that topic here. And as always, if you're interested in extending your health span, the duration of life we live free from disease and illness, then please consider subscribing.